So you know how boys tend to use holidays as an excuse to reach out to you? Like the ones that have no chance with you, and then they'll just hit you with the Merry Christmas, the Happy Easter, the Happy Martin Luther King Day. Well,
I got no Merry Christmas texts from the boys that love me that I haven't talked to in a year.
No men wished me Merry Christmas yesterday either.
Like, why aren't they obsessed with me anymore?
And I'm just wondering, for how long have we been ugly? This has been the whole time, or is this new?
Makes no sense, obviously.
Makes no sense.
Respect, actually, like they're taking it in good humor. I actually appreciate their honesty, truth be told, because they're describing a phenomenon, of behavior that they engage in that lots of women do, but would be reluctant to admit it. It's that they have these boys around them that they admit they're not interested in. These boys have no chance, but they'll hit them up and it's like, oh yes, a little self-esteem boost, a little validation. Like, yeah, this person still wants me. Look at them messaging me at Christmas or whatever. This is the classic orbiter, women will keep men, in rotation, in orbit, just for sort of that self-esteem boost. It's always so painful when men write to me on Hey Hero saying, hey, this woman said this to me, or, she finally got back to me. Does this mean that she likes me? Why else would she do this unless she had a romantic interest? And it's, it's always painful to burst someone's bubble and be like, you don't understand. Women will contact men and stay in their lives, not just because they have a romantic interest. Sometimes that's the case, but often it's the case that they just want you in their orbit. They just want the feeling of being a desirable woman. And every time you hit on them, every time you pay them attention, they get that little ego boost, it's a little serotonin hit like, yes, I am amazing. But, for these women, they've recognized their glory years are behind them. They've peaked. They're no longer young women anymore. They've passed their prime. And so now they're not getting as much male attention. And it's stinging. They're like, oh, gosh, this is new. What's happened? My self-esteem was probably, at least in part, actually predicated on having these men continually show interest in me. And so now that I'm not getting it, I'm doubting myself. Am I ugly? Have I always been ugly? Like, what's going on? But like I said, respect to them. They're taking it in good humor. When women ask me for dating advice and they want to know how they can secure a top quality man as a life partner, one of the first things I'll always say to them is make sure you're looking for your long-term relationship when you are young. There's going to be a period in your life, your early 20s, when you're at your most desirable, when you're most beautiful. And of course, this has all got biological origins. Men are attracted to youth and fertility so that they can have healthy children, etc., etc. But it is so important that women use that period of their peak beauty when they're at their most desirable to find that top quality man and secure a long-term relationship with him. Because as she gets older, she's going to get less attractive, right? No 35-year-old woman looks as good as she did when she was 22. And of course, because men are attracted to youth and beauty, older women receive less attention from men. And with less attention, it means that your dating pool shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. There's fewer high-quality men that are going to be interested in you. And so if you want to secure that top-quality guy, you need to strike while the iron is hot. When you're at your most beautiful, that's when you should be looking to find that guy so that you can settle down with him. I have seen some women online say that advice that I just gave there is sexist, right? That if men are attracted to young women, that's because we're all perverts and we should be ashamed of ourselves. There's nothing wrong with a woman in her 30s or 40s. She's a queen, men need to be less superficial and shallow. It's definitely a worrying sign of our times that deriving sexual strategy based on biological facts is inherently sexist to some people. But one of the reasons why it's so easy to ignore those criticisms is because you can tell the women who give that advice like, no, you don't need to settle down, you have fun in your 20s, wait until your 30s before you find that man. It's obvious to me that they're not motivated by actually helping that individual woman. They are social warriors. They're fighting for a social cause. What is that cause? Well, it's female empowerment and male demonization. The people who have that perspective, that value system, they want to see a society where the standards and expectations on women just get lower and lower and lower, and all of the things that come naturally to men, we should feel more and more ashamed about. And so, of course, it makes sense that they tell a woman to wait until her 30s and she's going to be just as desirable as she was in her early 20s, because when things are difficult for her in her 30s and she's not finding a man, then she's perfectly ripe to recruit to the cause. Like, you know why this is hard? Is because men are trash, men are shallow. And then suddenly she's a fellow activist. But while I can understand why that's better for their social cause, from my perspective, it's just a horrible thing to do because it's really at that individual woman's happiness. You gave her really bad practical advice. The advice that I give isn't motivated by trying to push for a particular social agenda. My motivation is always to help an individual. What can help them have the happiest life possible? And so when an individual woman asks me, Alexander, what can I do to attract that high quality man? My perspective is, okay, well, let's look at the biological cards that we've all been dealt. You're young, you're beautiful. Now's the right time to be looking for that man. You know, you're never going to have better access to top quality men. Men are never going to be more interested in you than they are right now. So find your forever guy. It might not be very PC because it shatters the myth that women are going to be desirable indefinitely, but I think a lot of women would actually be grateful to hear it told to them straight. Like, okay, you're at your peak right now. It's time to get serious. And I think that that's really going to help that individual woman become a happy person. And I like helping women. And yet, ironically, I'm called the sexist, yet they're the ones using women as pawns in their social agenda. And of course, my advice for men is different because men and women are different. I might encourage younger women to try and settle down, find their forever partner, but for young guys, it's a completely different landscape. Dating as a man between like 18 and 25 just sucks. I mean, dating for men of all ages is pretty difficult, but when you're a young guy, it is especially difficult, which is why I say, hey guys, when you're young, you don't need to be rushing to find your forever partner. I mean, if you find your dream girl and the two of you click, then yeah, absolutely lock that down. But for the most part, you can afford to be patient. And one of the reasons why it is especially difficult for young men to find their partners to succeed in dating is because there is so much competition. I want you to have a look at this graph. What you're looking at here are the ages of the women that Leonardo DiCaprio, the famous celebrity actor guy, has dated over the course of his adult life. And as you can see, he ages at a very consistent level, and yet the women that he dates stay around the same age. They're all in their early 20s. The reason why I think that this graph is significant to look at, why it can be very informative, is because you can think of Leonardo DiCaprio as sort of a quintessential top male. If someone was genuinely at the top of society's pyramid, the highest quality man has got the most options and can kind of date however he wants without having any limitations or restrictions. Well, this is what it looks like. There's a constant variety and there's lots of girls, but they're all really, really young. Now, I'm not saying that every man would just keep trading in girlfriends like he does. I understand some men want to find their forever partner and have children, of course, but let's be honest, I think some of the guys who are in unhappy marriages and they have, children and things like that, if they could swap their life for Leonardo DiCaprio's, they probably would. And so for a lot of guys, this is what their ideal dating life looks like. But do you see the implications here? Then, even as Leonardo DiCaprio is 45 and he's still dating a 22-year-old, do you see that because every man of basically all ages is universally agreeing that women in their early 20s are at their most beautiful, then that means there's going to be a huge amount of competition for that small demographic of women. Back when I was around 19 years of age, I had this girlfriend, and I remember her telling me about the man that she was dating before me. Now, she was the same age as I was. She was like a 19-year-old girl, but the guy that she was dating before I came along was 31. 31. He had already been married once and divorced. He had a son. He had a full, proper adult job, a really nice car, and the kind of dates that he took her on was so different. I'd take her to hang out with my buddies. We'd sit in the park. He would take her to fancy restaurants. Dating him was a completely different experience for her. And you might ask the question, Alexander, did that make you insecure that you're going to be compared to, a guy who's so much older and more accomplished? And the answer is no, it didn't make me insecure. It made me confused and frankly pissed off. That was one of the first times that I really understood that older men viewed women my age as legitimate prospects. In my little bubble just coming into the world, I was like, she was in high school a couple of years ago. I knew her back when we were studying for our final exams. I wasn't expecting to have to compete with older adult men for her affection. At the time, I kind of had contempt for him. I was like, what is this guy, some kind of pathetic loser? Dude, date women your own age. But I quickly realized the painful lesson that he wasn't some weird anomaly, that young women, you know, late teens, early 20s, they receive affection from men of all ages. And that's one of the reasons why it's so hard for young guys. Like, as a 20-year-old guy, you're looking at the fellow 20-year-old women, you're thinking, okay, who can I match up with? You know, like, we all know each other, we're all the same age, we all have our own experiences. But then suddenly guys in their mid-20s, their early 30s are turning up and they're hitting on your girl, and you're thinking, my God, like, these are my aged women, you know? Do I really have to compete with you? And here's the part that really hurt, is there may have been some part of you that was hoping that the women would put a stop to this, you know? Like, excuse me, Mr. 29-year-old man, I'm only 20 as a girl, and so it's inappropriate for you to be trying to date me. Like, no, I'm interested in men my own age. Go away, you old man. Maybe that's what we were hoping was going to happen, but no, the women really liked the old men. I mean, we know why, hypergamy, etc. You know, they've got more money, they've got more experience, often better developed social skills, they've accomplished more in their life. Like, in basically every regard, they're a more impressive man at 29 than they were at 19. And so the women were okay with it, but the situation didn't reverse. Like, as a 19-year-old man, I had no interest in dating a 31-year-old woman. She would look like an old lady to me. If I was a year or two out of school and some woman in her 30s was like hitting on me and trying to get me to date her, I'd think that there's something wrong with her. There is no gender equivalent on this at all. Younger women in their early 20s have a tolerance for dating older men, but younger men do not have that same tolerance for dating old women. Let me show you some graphs. I apologize that these are a little bit fuzzy, but this is taken from Tinder. These are some statistics. So let's look at this first graph. This is asking men and women whether or not they'd be open to dating a 25-year-old at these various ages. So the blue section is the women and the red section is the men. And you can see that these younger women are far more tolerant of dating these older men. That's why the female section begins to peak a lot earlier than the male section, and also why it goes higher. It also drops off a lot quicker. You can see that, like, after women are about 25 themselves, their tolerance for dating 25-year-old men starts to drop off dramatically. And by the time that they're 30, there's basically no women interested in dating a 25-year-old man. But compare that to men. You know, men who are 30, would they be interested in dating a 25-year-old woman? Absolutely, much higher. And this is all reinforced by this other graph as to the age distribution of people who would date a 35-year-old. And you can see that women, it's a lot higher. Like, a lot of younger women would be willing to date a 35-year-old man, far higher than men to date a 35-year-old woman. So you can actually see in the statistics why it's harder for young men, because you've got this limited demographic of women, you know, their early 20s, but every man wants to date them. And so there's this many women at that age, but there's this many men chasing after those women. And those women are fine with that. They welcome the attention. They're okay dating older men. You know what? I'll even go further than that. A lot of these women would prefer to date older men. This is not some delusional fantasy. This is hard data. This is science. This is statistics. When young guys write to me on Hey Hero needing advice and they say, look, I'm a couple of years out of school, or I'm in my early 20s and I'm really struggling with dating, my first thought is, yeah, of course. But, you know, so many guys, they don't understand just how difficult the dating market is, just how much competition there is, how hard it is for them to stand out. And so when they're not having any success in the dating market, they can't get a girlfriend, they think that there's something wrong with them. They think that there's something personal about them that's unattractive. And look, everybody could stand to develop and improve and become their best version of themselves and cultivate their masculinity. Of course, that's what my channel's about. Watch all of my videos, it'll help you out. But at a fundamental level, please don't assume that it's automatically personal. As a young guy, it's always going to be harder. According to Plenty of Fish, the ideal age range for a woman, the most desirable, is 25. And on OkCupid, it's like 21, 22. And so if you want to date a girl in that age range, as you get older, it's not necessarily going to reduce the amount of male competition for those few women in that demographic, but you're going to become more impressive. That's if you're doing the work, if you're becoming a better version of yourself, because really, with all that competition, it is absolutely essential that you stand out. You need to be one of the best guys. I don't mean to scare you or depress you. Honestly, that's not my intention. I want what's best for you. I'm telling you this information to try and help you out, but you need to know the facts of the situation. A lot of men in human history did not pass on their genes. Only about 40% of men historically actually had children. That's a huge number of men who were just discarded by evolution as not desirable. You want to be one of those guys who gets a girlfriend? better than that. You want to be one of those really rare guys who gets a high quality girlfriend, someone who actually improves your life. You can't be complacent about this stuff. You've got to put in the work. If you take this stuff seriously, you want to get this part of your life sorted, I really recommend signing up to my Patreon. You'll be surprised how different the content is over there. I go into a lot more depth. In fact, let's cue the end promo. If you've been used by women, if you've been abused and taken advantage of, lied to, cheated on, and you really have that sense that nobody actually cares about you, nobody has your best interests at heart, it can be very tempting to become extremely selfish yourself and just try and exploit others for your own personal gain. Well, what do you do if you don't want to follow that path? If you're concerned that the negativity you've experienced from other people is turning you negative, how can you possibly turn that around while still validating your genuine sense of injustice and victimhood? This is a deep topic, and it's what I cover in my latest Patreon video. If this describes you, I really recommend signing up so that you can see that. It's very affordable. It's just $5 a month. You get instant access to that video plus every other video in my back catalog. The value is just tremendous. It's a great way of supporting me, keeping the channel going. It's a great way to connect with other like-minded individuals. I'd love to see you over there so that you can be a part of it.